A Survey of Heavy Metal Toxicity of the Drinking Water in Erie County, New York by Jennifer Torres with SUNY Empire State College for the Ecology Field Study course of summer 2019. Why this topic? As a society, we've been hearing about the various ailments caused by metal toxicities in drinking water for decades. The lead toxicity in the water of Flint, Michigan, the hexavalent chromium or chromium-6 that environmental activist Aaron Brockovich found in high potency in Hinckley, California. And this got me to wondering, what's in my water? The water in my home has a relatively high turbidity sometimes and can be cloudy and smells highly chlorinated. High turbidity and hardness can be indicative of heavy metals. There's also a high incidence of lead toxicity in Erie County, New York. One of the reasons is due to improper disposal of contaminated products, such as lead-based paints and lead pipes, contaminating our ground soil, which can in turn contaminate the groundwater. Erie County is one of New York State's focal locations for the Primary Prevention of Childhood Lead Poisons pilot program. Other counties participating in this include Monroe, Onondaga, Oneida, Albany, Orange, and Westchester counties, as well as the 5 boroughs of New York City. Metals are substances that occur naturally in the Earth's crust. They possess high conductivity to electricity and in moderation are essential to the biological and physiological processes in living organisms. Because of this conductivity and the electrical charge, the metals do have the ability to form and lend out cations, or positively charged ions, to each other through a process of oxidation. When this occurs, it can wreak havoc on a molecular level, as the cations can attract more metals and toxins to themselves, as well as steal the electrons of our proteins, cells, DNA, etc. This increases the rate of free radicals in our body. Free radicals cause damage to these cellular structures, and this in turn is known as oxidative stress. Such damage can also be referred to as heavy metal toxicity. Severe health risks can be neurological, physiological, or metabolic, which means that it can affect the brain, it can affect the body, or it can affect the way that we metabolize things. Examples include autism and spectrum diseases, cancers and autoimmune diseases, as well as disorders of such metabolic organs as like the thyroid gland. My hypothesis. I believe that we will find levels of lead and mercury inconsistent with EPA standards in our local tap water. Off to the side here we have EPA's, just like a brief synopsis of what those EPA standards are. So what does that mean? The Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, has set forth standards on maximum contaminant levels, or MCLs, a maximum contaminant level goal, MCLG, and action levels. The MCLG for lead is 0, and the action level is 0.015 parts per billion. The MCLG and MCL action levels for mercury is 0.002 parts per million, or milligrams per liter. So that's the amount of the contaminant that should be found in the water. So how was my experiment conducted? First, I created 50 kits containing a Ziploc bag, a 50cc plastic centrifuge tube with a screw top, and the reason that I chose this is that the screw top allowed me to keep the water in the container without it spilling all over the place, for one, and two, because the container contains 0 traces of metal, I wasn't worried about cross-contamination or that metal skewing my results at all. I also came up with this water sample collection sheet, which included some data about, what kind of sample was collected, where I collected it, the pH, the hardness, and various contaminants that might be found in the water. All the items were labeled on site with a Sharpie and then brought home for testing. I also mapped out pretty much all of the water processing facilities in Erie County within a 20-mile radius of the city center of Buffalo. So the city center is about right over here by that 198 token. And then I broke my travels into 3 segments. I traveled to the South Towns first, which started down at Angola on the lake, and then traveled north to the North Tonawanda area. And then I remained in Erie County. There was kind of a break wall that you could walk out of at Angola on the lake, so me and my friends did travel out there to get 3 samples from the center of Lake Erie over here. And we also collected from various cities and areas along the shoreline. We went out to Orchard Park in West Seneca and collected from businesses. We collected a sample each from as close as we can get to the various processing facilities. So this Erie County Water Authority, this Erie County Water Authority over by the Peace Bridge, this Erie County Water Authority over by Niawanda Park in North Tonawanda, and that's how. I also put out an ad asking for volunteers to provide residential samples in exchange for a free report. So I did collect some residential samples, as well as random samples from businesses and the open sources, or lakes, rivers, creeks, streams, ponds, etc. When I got the samples home, I used these test strips. So they're test strips by Baldwin Meadows, 14-in-1 drinking water test kits that test for total alkalinity, pH, hardness, various metals such as iron, copper, lead, fluoride, mercury, chromium, all that good stuff. Per the instructions, you just dip the strip into the water for about 5 seconds, pull it out, lay it flat, let it dry. If the results looked a little bit wonky to me, I would test it 2 or 3 times just to make sure I got the utmost accuracy for whatever location I was testing, and to make sure that, the various reagents and the dyes didn't bleed together or blot anything incorrectly. So I did take care to get the utmost accuracy that I could. Once that testing and initial data collection was complete, I entered all of my data into Microsoft Excel and organized it by South Towns, North Towns, and the downtown/central Buffalo areas. I then took the average of each incidence of contaminant occurrence by contaminant and location and organized those into their own data sheets and a chart. So, to make a little bit more sense of that, here's what I did. So again, I entered each piece of data for the North Towns, each piece of data for the South Towns, each piece of data for the North and Central locations, and I took the average pH, I took the average hardness, each incidence, to calculate an average for each location. In this column here, I have the EPA MCLG for reference. Overall, the averages of Buffalo, or Erie County as a whole, which is the final column over here, was pretty good. Our average pH is pretty neutral. Hardness is borderline hard water, but not too bad. Chlorine's within range, fluoride's within range, copper's within range. Lead is technically within range. It's not at the action level as a whole yet. Now, if you look over one column to the left, you will notice that in the downtown central location, it is at action level. I had one outlier whose levels were a little bit skewed and higher than the rest. And honestly, as a disclaimer, I think that's why it's showing as so high, because he does have older pipes in his home, and it was bad enough, I think, to skew the results. Um, the one thing that I found interesting is that chromium was consistently high in each area, no matter what source I took it from, residential, business, and open source. So, um, was my hypothesis correct? Ultimately, yes and no. No, the mercury was well within range and not high, as it was 0 across all areas. Again, lead was at 0.0157 or 0.0156 parts per billion in that downtown region, and maybe at action level, but because I took so few samples, that one outlier could have skewed the results, and more testing would need to be completed for a more accurate read. Overall, I'd say it was within range. And then, like I said, interestingly enough, chromium was consistently well above the MCLG in action levels. But again, I think that we would need more testing to determine the accuracy and see if that actually was an issue. So, if you're concerned about the contents of your drinking water, you may request a free lead test kit from the New York State Department of Health by contacting them at 518-402-7650. And that concludes my presentation. So I thank you guys for taking the time to watch this and hope you enjoyed it.